Dear friends, grace to you and peace from God our Creator and from our risen Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'll never forget Mildred Bechtel. She was one of the senior members of the last church I served, Holy Trinity Lutheran Church in San Carlos. I visited Mildred early on in my time there, and I have this vivid image of Mildred slouching in an armchair with one leg draped over the armrest. And I thought, not bad for a woman in her 80s. Mildred had a bright smile and an energetic aura and was clearly a farm girl from the Midwest. Her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren were wonderful, and she was clearly the matriarch, whose presence and leadership created a flourishing family. I recall once sitting in her home talking about, of all things, energy use. I'm not quite sure how that came up on a pastoral visit, but Mildred jumped up and rummaged through a drawer to pull out our latest bill from PG&E. That's how much energy I use, she said proudly. Really, she was trying to tell me and everyone sitting there how little energy she actually used. An embarrassingly low amount of energy for anybody else that would look at that bill. And in that little piece of paper, I saw the farmer's daughter who learned to live with thrift. And I couldn't help but forgive her a little bit for bragging about how thrifty she actually was. A little over a month ago, I taught a group of first call pastors about creation care, environmental ethics, ecological awareness, etc. The First Call Theological Education Program was something that I had gone through myself, a great way to reflect on being a pastor during one's first call. My job this past February was to talk to these first call pastors about how creation care can help them do their jobs better, essentially. There's a lot one can say about this, much of it not very helpful. One point I made that I hope was helpful was that whatever you believe about environmental ethics, even in ministry, our bodies interact with the physical world around us, whether it's parking in the parking lot, or how we handle trash cans, or toilets and water flow, etc. When we do ministry, we do it in the world. Our bodies take up space. We consume resources. The question for us in ministry and in life is whether we do that efficiently, on the one hand, or wastefully. When given a choice, I think most people would choose to do things efficiently. It saves money, it saves time, it's better for the planet and for us. Plus it gives us a sense of being on top of our game. If we are efficient with the resources, we are being most faithful with that which God has given us to tend and to keep. Genesis 2:15. It's kind of a slam dunk. And I felt a little proud about myself for coming up with that one. But we see something different in our texts for today. To be sure, one theme is consistent. Our bodies interact with the natural physical world around us. In all three texts this morning, it is clear that God's people, A, have bodies, and B, must move those bodies through space in one way or another. And of course, the pretext to all this is, or the backdrop is, God created it all and provides for us that which we need. The prophet Isaiah, in this vivid image natural text, is trying to make a case in this section of Isaiah for God's people Israel to return to their home in ancient Palestine from exile in Babylon. They've been taken into captivity for about 2 generations. The land between Babylon and Palestine, if you know anything about it, is foreboding. It's an utter desert. There is nothing there. And so, for many other reasons in addition to that, the people are not so sure if they want to go back. Who would want to trek across the desert not knowing how safe they would be, not knowing what they would eat or drink, etc. Not knowing if they would even arrive at the land of their ancestors. Ah, Isaiah says, God will provide you what you need. Plants and animals to eat along the way, and water in the desert to sustain your bodies as you go. Water for all living creatures. Such is the God of providence. That's what's behind this text that we see today. You move your bodies through space, and I will provide for you. Likewise, Paul, in our text from Philippians, strives for something particular. Now, Paul has no compunction about talking about how great he is, about his own accomplishments. Paul was neither a wallflower nor a cowering man of insecurity. His ability to follow the law, he says, was second to none. It gives him reason for confidence in the flesh, he says, which is kind of a way of talking about our worldly values, like and how great other people could see us. He tells us of how his own body was circumcised as a baby, according to Jewish law, and that in his flesh lay the history of Israel through the tribe of Benjamin. He's linked to this family that is God's people, physically. Not only did he do what he was supposed to do, he was who he was supposed to be. But now in the light of Christ, and the message that he has heard, the good news, all of that means nothing. Now he seeks nothing other than to strive for that which Jesus attained, the resurrection from the dead. Paul's focus is still on the body, not one that looks back at its ancestors, but one that looks forward to the coming day of the Lord. And the completion of that time is the resurrection of the body. And our gospel is about a very particular body. In this fairly well-known story, Jesus' feet are anointed by Mary, the sister of Lazarus, after which she wipes them with her hair. This strangely sensual scene has many elements and layers. The nard, or essential oil that Mary uses, was farmed from a flowering plant in the Himalayas in Nepal, China, or India. I had to laugh when I researched this because my wife's been using essential oils. It's become this thing in our home. So I felt oddly connected to this text in a new way. But this essential oil had a long road to make it to ancient Palestine, from the Himalayas all the way to the ancient Near East. And today, plus it was very, very expensive. I mean, very expensive. 300 denarii, which is the amount that it says in the text that it's worth, was about a year's wages. In today's dollars, about $54,509. Think about that. Nearly $55,000 poured out of a little jar of oil onto somebody's feet. I mean, you kind of can't help but understanding why the disciples are like, really? Yeah, that much? I mean, there's so many other things we could spend that money on. I mean, really? Come on, people. What is she doing? She's wasting it. That was their point. Somewhat ironic that these words are spoken by Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. According to the evangelist John in our text, Judas wasn't really interested in the poor or preserving the money for another cause. He just wanted to steal it. And Jesus says words that are controversial, I think we could say. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. In this, on the one level, Jesus is calling out Judas' dishonesty. I mean, come on, Judas, you don't really mean that. On the other hand, this is often meant or read to mean that the poor, because they're always with us, are less important than Jesus. Now, the poor you'll always have. But I'm somebody special. But that's not in line with Jesus' own life and ministry and the way he lived his life. He regularly went out to the poor, the outcast, to declare that God is with them, and to show that in God's reign, worldly markers like wealth and status simply don't matter. They don't apply in the way the world assigns them. There is another way of translating this line, interestingly. Have the poor with you always. As if to say, carry the poor with you in your hearts as you go forward in your ministry from this place. And yes, that means to care for them, to fight for them, to give them what they need. And recognize that something special is happening in this moment that deserves to be paid attention to. There is a real element of bodily preparation in this text. It's symbolic, of course, but pouring expensive oil on Jesus' feet is a way of saying that Jesus' body is precious and thus deserves costly oil as a way of commemorating this moment. Our faith is about bodies and their interactions with the natural world, to be sure, but it comes together around a very specific body and what happens to it. In a real sense, our faith is centered on the body of Jesus. That's what the crucifixion is all about, the resurrection. We sometimes sell that element short, that Jesus touched sick and wretched bodies, bringing healing and wholeness, that he bent to wash the feet of his disciples as his own feet are being anointed here in this text, and that his body will one day be nailed to a cross, will bleed, and will die. So Mary is preparing Jesus' body in a somber moment that looks forward to an ominous future. In Jesus' body, we see our own. His crucifixion gives our own suffering context and meaning, and his resurrection gives us hope, as St. Paul writes to the Philippians. But the element that is most unique to this story symbolically is really not the issue of bodies and how they interact with the physical world, but the issue of waste. Mary truly does seem to be wasting something valuable, not something none of us wants to do, really, whether it's energy or money or oil or anything, really. But this symbolic act demonstrates a deeper spiritual truth that we all need to hold on to. God's love is extravagant and wasteful. It is wasteful. Just like the nard poured on Jesus' feet, God does not care about the efficiency of resources, especially not when it comes to his love for us and for the whole world. That, in fact, is what this whole text is about. Jesus, in his own loving self-sacrifice, is God's great offering to the world of goodness and love, and that is not about the efficiency of resources. Now, we are not relieved of our duty to preserve resources and operate efficiently as a church community, as an organization, something my old friend Mildred Bechtel knew well. It is our biblical calling as stewards of creation. And when we laid Mildred to rest quite a few years ago, we discussed these core values of who she was and her farm mentality about preserving that which we cannot afford to lose. But really, at the end of the day, her faith was the unifying anchor for her life and her church community. So we're not relieved of our duty to be efficient, but we are all, as biblical stewards, but we are also stewards of the mysteries of God, as St. Paul said. I love that phrase. And among those mysteries are how God chose extravagant grace and wasteful love to accomplish his purpose in the world. As we prepare to walk with Jesus through Holy Week and Easter coming up in a week or two, we gain a fresh perspective about that wasteful love present in the cross and in the empty tomb.